Hey guys, welcome back to the True North podcast. This week we have my friend Tim Cox on the podcast, and we're going to go through his life as a pastor, a father, and into what he's doing now with an organization called Wine to Water, a great organization that provides clean water to areas that don't have access to it. And so it's a great conversation. Stick around to find out all that there is to know about Wine to Water and a really cool story of how God has intervened in Tim's life, and he's just been obedient and walked with them. And so, once again, thank you for joining us on the podcast, and we'll get started with it right now. All right, Tim Cox, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Welcome to the True North podcast. So you and I met probably about a year ago, right?
Yeah.
Playing basketball.
Yeah. Weird.
Yeah.
It was weird.
So
wasn't planning on that day.
Yeah.
I think it was just because of an errant basketball went into your court.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. So we've got a group of guys that we play basketball every week, and Tim was over there. You're practicing with your son, right?
Yeah.
And we needed another guy, and we're like, okay, who else is old and slow out here? And like that guy right there.
Yeah.
And so I think Derek
That's true.
Derek went up and talked to you, and you're like, yeah, I'm in. And then it's been history ever since, and we've built a really cool friendship. And you do some pretty cool work yourself in helping people all around the world get clean water with Wine to Water. And so wanted to invite you onto the podcast and hear a little bit about that, but then hear about who you are and what role God has played in your life, and the crazy story that I've heard some bits and pieces of your past. And so welcome on. I'm really glad you're here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the conversation. That group of guys that we play basketball with has turned out to be a tremendous blessing, like in my life. We're really there in a pretty pivotal transition in my life. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. And so catch us up on your family dynamics right now. You're married,
Married.
kids.
We have 5. My wife and I have 5 children.
Okay.
We have a son that graduated college this past year. We have a daughter who's 21. She is a air traffic controller in the Air Force, and she's stationed at Vance Air Force Base up in Enid.
Yeah.
And then we have a daughter who is 17. Carter, who is, of course, who you met, is 15. And then our youngest daughter is 10.
Dude.
So that's the run.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. And along with all the things you do in your own, in your life and your calling too.
Yeah. I think we're on the other side where it's gotten easier as the kids have gotten a little bit older, a little bit more help, a little bit more responsibility they can take. But
yeah.
It's been a journey.
Yeah.
I never thought that I would have 5 kids growing up, but it's been amazing. It's been amazing.
And you guys just recently, y'all moved to Oklahoma City a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, year and a half ago.
Year and a half. And so, and was that to follow your daughter because she was here? Is that right?
Yeah. So I had taken a new position at Wine to Water, and that allowed me to be remote. And at the time, we just figured. Haley had received, she had been at the base for like 6 months at that point. And like, this is a good opportunity for us to go be in Oklahoma for a while, be close to her, give Carter the opportunity to get plugged into some of the AAU scene in and around Oklahoma City, which is growing.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
And he's going into high school, right?
He is.
And so he's been in 8th grade this year.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. That's
and
correct.
So he's out there. He plays basketball with us too, and he just runs circles around us. It's absolutely insane.
I played him one-on-one a couple of months ago, and I won't even tell you the score. It was bad.
Was it the first time?
That's the first time that we really played, and he torched me pretty good.
Oh man.
Yeah, he's very athletic.
Yeah, we need to have you on for the Father's Day episode of how to deal with that transition of losing to your son for the first time.
Yeah, emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
Proud, devastated all at the same time.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
But he's a good kid, man.
Yeah.
I love playing ball with him because he takes it seriously. He's working on his craft the whole time. He's not
Yeah.
arrogant, and he's got a good dad to support him and coach him all the way through.
Yeah. Uh, he came to me when he finished his seventh grade year. He didn't have a good year. He was out of shape. Too many video games. Had
Hmm.
what I call Fortnite disease.
Yeah.
And after the last game, he walked in living room and he said, "I don't want that to ever happen again. I want to be great."
Mm.
And I just remember I looked at him and just said, "That's amazing, but are you willing? Like, are you willing to count the cost? Do you know what that is?"
Hmm.
And he said, "I'll do whatever it takes to be at the top." And from that moment on, he was getting up at 5:30 in the morning, going to the gym. There was a little CrossFit gym down the road from our house at the time, hooked up with a trainer, and he lost 25 pounds and then put 30 pounds back on of just muscle, got super lean, and became just, I mean, he really worked on his game.
Hmm.
So I was just there to support him, but he's put in the work. So
Yeah.
it's amazing to see your kids make a commitment and then pursue it like a dog on a bone,
Yeah.
and then watch them get to reap some of those benefits.
Yeah.
So great life lesson.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
So, so you guys have been here for a year and a half. Let's rewind to kind of your walk with God. What was, because you grew up in New York, right?
Yes.
And so talk about that and your family dynamics growing up and
Yeah. So my mom was originally, she was born in upstate New York, about an hour north of Albany, so foothills of the Adirondacks.
Okay.
My father was born in Cincinnati. They met in college and I ended up moving after they got married. They had me. We were in Cincinnati for a little bit when I was real small, but moved to upstate New York when I was about 4 years old. So I lived for 30 years in upstate. So I was raised in a very conservative. I would I think it would be safe to say like an ultra conservative church, small country church, 30 people. For the most part, our family was very consistent. But we pretty consistent Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. There was a period in my childhood where my parents kind of wandered away from the Lord a little bit, and we stopped going to church, and my parents' marriage faltered pretty heavy. But then I think a pastor visited our house, and they were having like special like revival services or something like that. And we went back to church. We went to church that Sunday, and my parents really found healing. And so, and that was the last time. So I would have been in probably maybe 6th or 7th grade. That's the last time that I've, ever seen my parents, falter, or seen their marriage unhealthy.
Oh, wow.
So that was a long time ago. So I certainly saw what God could do inside of a marriage when I was young. So I'm grateful for the way, I will say, even though we went to an ultra conservative church, one thing that my father instilled in me at a very young age, I was no different than any other teenager. I asked tons of questions. What I found is that I would ask people inside the church, why do we believe this way? And I always used to get traditional answers like, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't question that, Timmy.
Yeah.
I remember one time I asked my grandfather a very direct question about a core element of our doctrine. And he was highly offended that I even questioned it, highly offended. And so, but my father was always very, very good about, he would say, I actually don't know the answer to this. Like, it's what the church preaches, or it's what the church believes, or it's part of our religious guidelines, but I actually don't know why we believe that. Like, you have a Bible, like, read it. And he would always quote, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. I can't tell you how many times my dad quoted that verse to me when I was a kid. And so early on, my parents kind of instilled in me the importance of. So when I was 15, 16 years old, I really started to dig like in the word and started to discover some things that I actually found that the church that I was raised in, I actually didn't align with,
Hmm.
like doctrinally. And some of the things actually, to be honest, I actually felt like it even violated
Oh,
like my
wow.
faith just because of their stance around just grace and different things. And so it really helped instill in me at a pretty young age the importance of understanding why you believe what you believe.
Hmm.
But and then I went after I graduated high school. My senior year was probably my most uh, rebel- rebellious season of life, I would say, after being quote unquote the church boy for so many years at
Hmm.
school. I caved to some peer pressure and never did anything too crazy, but I experienced some wanderings. But then I did a year at a Bible college in Cincinnati, spent some time with some of my dad's family, and then ultimately I ended up just I met I went to school with Teresa, um, same high school. She was a year behind me. She has a sister in my grade. I was actually good friends with her sister. I came back after a year in college. She was just graduating, and we ended up going on a ski trip at Gore Mountain, I believe. And so
A
we were
group
snow.
of friends or just the two of you?
Well, it was supposed to be a group of
Like,
friends because we were just friends. We were talking on AOL Instant Messenger.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, like
Dang.
when the door
Yeah.
opens, and I had just mentioned, oh, I'm going skiing tomorrow. She's like, oh yeah, I love skiing, and I said, well, do you want to go? She's like, yeah. Like there's a whole group of us going. Everybody bailed that morning. And ended up, it was just her, I, and my dad. So really, really, really awkward.
Yeah.
But we went skiing, and then that just led to her. My parents did not have cable TV. So her family did.
Hmm.
And that was the rise of the WWE.
Okay.
We're talking Stone Cold
Yeah.
and The Rock. And so she would videotape, that's a word. She would videotape Monday Night Raw,
Yeah.
and she'd bring it up to me on Tuesday. I'd get home from work. At the time, I had gotten a job working at a hot tub manufacturing
Yeah.
facility, and we'd watch Monday Night Raw. And so we slowly fell in love
Yeah.
watching Rock Bottoms and
Yeah.
Stone Cold Stunners.
We need to send this story to Hallmark, and then they need to make a Christmas movie based
that's
on that.
that's the honest truth. And we have brothers, younger brothers that are the same age, and so they connected. And so that was almost like how we hung out originally. Was always we brought our brothers. They would hang out,
Yeah.
jump on the trampoline or whatever in the pool, and then so we dated for about a year, and then ultimately we got engaged and got married.
Yeah.
And 9 months to the day, we had Kobe. True story.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
Now, was she raised in church or?
yeah, so her family was Catholic. I think that she maybe went a few times to mass,
Hmm.
maybe her first confirmation. But it was interesting when Teresa and I were dating. She she made a statement to me one time. She went to church with me quite a bit actually while we were dating, and she said, "I've come to the conclusion. This is to me is one of the most powerful testimonies, and it's like a simple line." She said, "I've come to the conclusion that if there is a God who has created all of this and has provided life, there has to be more to knowing him than just mass."
Mm,
Which I was, I remember even at that age, I was just pretty like, that's a really powerful
no
statement.
kidding.
And so she got saved. Teresa got saved at a revival service underneath some pretty hardcore hellfire and brimstone
Yeah.
preaching, which is funny because today she really prefers like he's passed now, but like Dr. Charles Stanley.
Uh huh.
She really prefers like soft spoken, kind of just deliver the truth.
Yeah.
But in that moment and at that time, he delivered
Yeah.
the words that she needed to hear.
Yeah.
So she got saved while we were engaged,
Okay.
and we got married. So
Wow.
yeah,
And so that's been 25 years then?
yeah, yep.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
our 25th anniversary is coming up.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you.
That's really
Appreciate it.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are still in upstate New York and starting a family. What's it look like from there?
So this first off, this is horrible advice. If there's any young person listening to this, so when I was during that period where I was really diving into the word, when I was 15, 16
Mhm.
years old, I really felt I really felt like God was calling me into the ministry of some kind. But I had no idea what that looked like.
Mhm.
Um, but I knew that there was something, there was like something burning inside of me uh, that I couldn't really describe. I actually wrote my parents a note to try to explain what I was feeling. My mom told me last time I talked to her, she actually still has that note.
Oh, wow.
Um, I never told Teresa about this until after we were married, that's really bad marital advice.
Yeah.
But thankfully, Teresa's at that point in time, Teresa's, her heart it was actually very, very simple. She's like, if that's what you feel like God's calling you to do, then that's what you should do. Um, for the first couple years of marriage, I didn't pursue ministry. I would even say I even wandered a little bit. I don't think my relationship with Jesus was nearly as consistent as what it had been in years previous. Um, and I'm not sure. I think a lot of that was honestly just a lack of a local church. I really needed that in my life at that time, and
Mhm.
I probably really could have used a solid group of like men around me, and I
Mhm.
didn't really have that in our church structure, and just became passive.
Mm.
And some time went on, and I'll keep this because this I could go on for hours about this, but I went through so I got to a place where I was almost running, I would say, from God, like a little bit, not in a rebellious sense where it was reckless, but I definitely was not pursuing his will for my life. That's
Yeah.
for sure. And I was actually running basketball tournaments and events in our local community as like a side hustle. And that led to me opening up like a retail shop where I was selling. I actually got a deal with, I don't know if you remember McDavid, which made like protective wear. Dwayne Wade kind of introduced them to the
Mhm.
market, like sleeves and all that stuff. And then I was an official dealer for like and one when and one was a
Yeah.
thing. Actually had it stuff to where they were actually a tour stop was going to be at my location. So I'd actually networked and done a lot.
Yeah.
Something happened in the business deal with the property that I leased. It was an oversight where I actually found out I was not legally able to host events there, but I was locked into a lease, and ultimately it ruined me financially.
Oh, no.
So I was just totally devastated. I was living under an insane, at a very young age, with young kids, financial pressure, very desperate. And fast forward to one night, I'm sitting at my desk in this shop, looking at all this merchandise, which I'm not going to sell if I'm not hosting events. And I just broke. I just had one of those moments where I broke and just kind of threw my hands into the air and just really cried out and just said, God, like I'm in over my head, and I have no idea how to find my way out of this. But if you can provide some clarity and help me to get out of this, I'll do I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Mm.
I'm not gonna run anymore. The next day, my parents had gotten back from Cincinnati, visiting family. I'm sitting on my parents' couch, and my mom says, "Oh, Timmy, had a great conversation with your uncle Ken, who's a pastor of a church, and he was telling us how much he wishes he could find like a young couple like you and Teresa who had a heart for young people, and which he's really looking for a youth pastor, and he's just really been praying for the right one." And it was literally like God like ascended from or descended from heaven and like hit me in the head with a baseball bat. It was so vividly clear.
Yeah.
I had no questions. I was like, I prayed this. This is an unbelievable timing. And it was just overwhelming to me. I went home and I said, I think we have to move to Cincinnati.
Wow.
Like, I need to say yes to
How old
this.
were you at this point?
So I would have been, let's see, I would have been 24
Golly.
probably, right around there, I would say. And so no pastoral experience.
Yeah.
I did 1 year of theological studies.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I did well.
And one night of a really intense prayer.
And one night of really intense prayer. But I mean, obviously, had a knowledge of the word and had a heart for Jesus. Raised in, I did my time of Sunday school and
Yeah.
countless messages. But so we made that trip. I called my uncle up and I said, I know this is going to sound crazy. This is what has happened. My uncle started sobbing on the other
Oh,
other
wow.
end of the phone, and he's like, "If that is your heart, you can start next month." And that church actually rallied around, took offerings, had commitments. They were able to buy or rent Teresa and I housing.
Yeah. Did they buy
And
all your and one gear too?
yeah, the and one gear sat in storage for a long time. Yeah, and but I did that, and to take care of my family because I was a youth pastor at a small church. I got a job working at Cintas.
Yeah.
Picking up dirty uniforms and dropping off clean
Rugs
uniforms.
and all
Yeah,
that.
I was that guy, and actually kind of enjoyed that because I was the assistant to a driver. I was assistant to the regional manager.
Yeah.
And it was a really good time. And I was only there for a year, but that year proved to be like paramount in my life. Because I got my uncle was gracious enough to allow me to begin to speak on like youth Sundays, and kind of mentored me, and I got a glimpse of what God can do in your life if you're just willing to say yes, even if you feel unqualified or you feel unprepared. And so that kind of, this is a horrible way to put this, but it became almost addicting, like the feeling of peace or the feeling of purpose, of knowing that God was using you and being able to see God change lives before you. Was just incredibly, just humbling in so many ways. So about a year into that, once again, like I can't explain it, but I just told Teresa, like, I don't know why, but we've only been here for a year, but I really feel like we need to move back to New York, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. But we did, and when we moved back to New York, the pastor of my home church at the time had actually just stepped away. And I got a phone call and they said, "Hey, would you come and lead? You're back in the area. Would you lead Bible studies for us?" So I started leading Bible studies at my home church, which doctrinally I'm really not aligned with.
Yeah.
It's part of a conference, so it's not independent.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a weird situation. But I started doing Bible study. I think there was 9 people. And then there was 12 people. And then there was 14 people. And next thing you know, there's 30 people. And my brother-in-law started playing songs on his acoustic guitar with a cracked neck with an automotive clamp on it, holding it together, and we're like, man, this is turned into like just random people are showing up.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, we really, this is like, we've formed a local, like God is putting together like a local church here.
Yeah.
And so we actually got together, we removed ourselves from that conference and just became like a non-denominational church, which was a very difficult process for someone my age. And then they kind of took a consensus like vote of like, hey, like, Tim, we would like you to be the pastor of this church.
Wow.
So the first church that I pastored, I was pastoring my brother, my sister, my mom, my dad, three sets of aunts, uncles, cousins, and then people from the community.
Yeah. Did they all call you pastor?
Some of it was weird. Some of them did, but it was odd. I mean, it was. I mean, I don't know. There's no way to say it any other way.
Yeah.
It was, interesting. God lays a topic on your heart, to preach on,
Yeah.
or you're preaching or a series to teach
Yeah.
through. You're like, oh, this is gonna
Every story you think of, the
this
people, the
this
subjects are in the
yeah,
audience.
well, because you know that they know
Yeah.
everything about you. I mean, I've lived with most of them,
Yeah.
So they're like, how are these people going to receive this portion of truth when they've
Yeah.
they've seen me live.
Yeah. It's
They
just like Jesus going back to Nazareth, right?
yeah,
Like that was the hardest people for him to
yeah.
talk to.
Yeah,
And
I'd occasionally have some people come up to me afterward who are like, "That must have been tough for you to preach this morning."
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So but it was a good experience. It
If you
was
can do that, you can
yeah.
do anything.
That church actually grew to where it was running like over 100 people,
Wow.
and it was way out in the boonies.
Yeah.
It's called Fox Hill. This is a beautiful place in the Adirondacks. And we kind of adopted this tagline of worth the drive.
Mm-hmm.
But people would make the trip up this mountain, windy road, and
Oh,
to this
cool.
old country church. But we had some incredible times of worship there. And that church ended up actually planting a church in a little city called Gloversville, which is it's the poorest city in the poorest county in New York.
Okay.
So it's just like economically very challenged. But we planted a church there, and in an old theater, and it was church in a box. We'd go in on Sunday nights, Sunday evenings, and we were labeled the night church. Sunday evenings, we'd set up in this old abandoned theater, and we did that for a couple of years. And then that church actually ended up purchasing a building, and it's still operating
Wow.
today. And that was pretty amazing, because that was the first time that I had ever pastored in an area where we were one or two generations removed from like the Sunday school generation,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very unchurched.
Mm.
And we would see 40 and 50-year-old people come to know Jesus, but they didn't know what the colon was between, the 3 and the 16.
Yeah.
And so we had to introduce absolute Bible basic
Yeah.
discipleship programs to really kind of establish like core building blocks for brand new believers to grow. And that's when I fell in love. That's when I really fell in love with ministry, because there is watching someone accept Jesus and then start to crawl and then start to walk and then start to run, to me, is the same level of joy as watching my own kids, crawl, walk, and run. So yeah, it was incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How long did you do that?
So that was a total that period right there was a total of 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What was next after that?
So then my parents and my brother Ty, he actually they moved to Tennessee. Kind of my dad was preparing for retirement. Kind of fell in love with East Tennessee. No state income tax.
Yeah.
So like I'm going to move the family business. That's the whole time I was pastoring. I was always bivocational. I was always a full-time pastor and then working full-time in our family business at that time, which was an injection mold shop. So my dad has done plastic injection molding pretty much his whole adult life.
Yeah.
So working for family business moves. I stayed an extra year after that, still continuing to pastor in upstate. And then Teresa and I decided that we would make the move. The biggest deciding factor for that was I've made many mistakes over the years pastoring. Could have done things differently and made different decisions. And there's always learning. The biggest mistake that I made is that I became so invested in my love for ministry that my oldest son, Kobe, I actually became pretty disconnected from him. There was like a 4-year gap where I was present, but I wasn't really present.
You weren't engaging. Yeah.
Like it's possible when you're pastoring to be so invested in saving the world that you could lose your own family. And I began to feel and recognize, thankfully, God kind of awakened me to this reality that like your son needs you and he doesn't even really know who you are.
Mhm.
All he knows about you is that you really love other people.
Oh, wow.
And so that was pretty gut wrenching. So I made this commitment. We're going to move to Tennessee for a year. I'm not going to do anything but pour into Kobe
Mhm.
and just try to rekindle that, reestablish relationship with him, um, um, just build into that relationship. And I'm very, very grateful because I was able to do that. And so for that first year, it was literally us in a us in a farmhouse with chickens, goats, which is a horrible idea, um, and like this literally does sound like a Hallmark movie. I was just working in the family business that had moved, sipping sweet tea on a front porch of an old farmhouse in East Tennessee,
Yeah.
watching chickens and goats, and just spending time with family, which I hadn't done a ton of because of just being so young and overzealous and undisciplined and
Mhm.
overinvested
Mhm.
into ministry.
What did
So
you what are some things you learned in that year about your family, about you? That seems like it had to have been a pretty
yeah,
incredible year.
so I think I learned that all of my spiritual conversations that I'd ever had with my family were really about the church. Were really about church.
Mm.
I don't think there was a lot of life application or actual real conversations about Jesus, about what he can do, who he can be in your life. Um, I, I mean, I learned that like my oldest son was really broken.
Mm.
Now he was going through some pretty big like decisions in his that he was working through and situations that he was working through, and I didn't realize the space that he was in.
Mm.
I'm fully convinced that had we had not moved, I don't know what would have happened to Kobe.
Yeah.
And so, um, you know,
Yeah.
it's a tough realization, like removing ministry from it. But like when you realize that like God's entrusted with you this amazing child, and then when you realize that there's things that like that you haven't been fulfilling, it's just it's hard, it's hard, but I'm grateful. Like I hear people say that like God is a God of second chances, and I am so glad that that's not true
Mhm.
because he's like a God of like many
Way more than
chances.
that, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thankful that he was able to kind of reveal that to me, and uh, allowed for me to be around some people and in a situation where I was able to pause for a season of life and spend some time um, having some really great conversations
Yeah.
with him, some healing conversations. Got a chance to learn about robotics
Yeah.
um, and Harry Potter
Yeah.
and Minecraft, and
Yeah.
that's Kobe. Kobe
That's
is
awesome.
always been he's a reader. He's a brilliant mind. Has a bachelor's in conservation and with a minor in biology. So he's just an amazing conversationalist,
Mhm.
but super deep,
Yeah.
and a person who's filled with so much compassion. So with the way that he sees the world and the way that I see the world, I tend to be very black and white.
Uh-huh.
Um, like I've taken like spiritual gifting at tests. I always come very high like on like prophecy,
Uh-huh.
not seeing the future or what's going to happen, but rather being able to see clearly like what is right, what is
Mm.
wrong, black and white.
Mhm.
And so I see the world differently than he sees it.
Mhm.
And so our conversations became amazing. Um, it radically impacted my life
Yeah.
because it taught me a lesson on compassion. And uh, so last crazy story, I had told Teresa that I would not do ministry for a year. We moved to East Tennessee on July 3rd, 2016. July 4th, 2017, July 3rd, because it was right before 4th of July. So July 3rd, so exactly 1 year. I am working in the shop. I'm standing back in the warehouse. And a guy walks to the door and walks up to me and says, "Are you Tim Cox?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Hi, my name is Dean. I'm part of a pastoral search committee for the community church down in Neva. Do you know where that is?" I said, "Oh, yeah." He's like, "Well, we found some videos on YouTube and we watched some of them. And we would really like you to interview for the position of pastor at community." It was exactly
1 year.
1 year to the day. And I went home and I said, funny thing is he walked in 5 minutes after my brother and my father had just had a pretty intense argument about business decisions. So I wasn't feeling very pastoral at the
Yeah.
moment, you know. And he walked in and asked, and I said, "Well, I don't even know what to say about that. Let me get your number." I went home and told Teresa. She's like, "Well, it's hard to argue with the timing."
My
And right
gosh.
around that same time, Kobe had actually come to me about a month before that and said, "Hey, Dad, I've really, really enjoyed this time, but I really miss you pastoring."
Oh, wow.
And so I ended up taking that position, was offered that position, and I pastored there for 5 years before ultimately moving to Oklahoma. And that was from a ministry perspective, that was an amazing experience. It was a smaller church, and it's almost like a church plant, you
Yeah.
know. And amazingly enough, the founding pastor of that church who retired actually stayed
Really?
and what became a wonderful mentor for me during over a 5 year period.
Wow, that's
And that's
rare,
pretty
right?
rare.
Yeah.
Yes. He left for 1 year. And after 1 year, he came back, and him and his wife, who is probably the sweetest individual I may have ever met in my entire life, they became wonderful friends. And but yeah, it was a challenging place to pastor because we non-denominational. Obviously, I'm I was not going to get up, and I preach in a pair of jeans and a pair of gym shoes, and probably a little bit outside of the traditional box, I would say, maybe in some minds. And so it's a pretty conservative area. So I wouldn't say I was the most like widely accepted individual there amongst in church circles,
Yeah.
but count your costs. I mean, we were reaching people, and people were getting saved, and it was amazing. Yeah.
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 What outside of you talked about earlier, seeing people, encounter Jesus and begin to walk, crawl, run, all that. What brought you the most joy in that season of pastoring a church?
So I have two things. The first is I had a chance to see a couple of guys who I went to high school get saved in the church I was pastoring in upstate New York, and baptizing friends from high school was pretty amazing.
No kidding.
Yeah, pretty amazing. So that was obviously I had a chance to baptize my wife and every one of my children.
Oh yeah.
So that those things. And I guess the other thing would be watching a believer or watching a person come to know Jesus, become a believer, crawl, walk, run, then lead somebody else to Jesus and ask them to come up to help baptize that individual after getting saved, and then watching them walk through that full discipleship
disciples
circle.
making disciples.
Yeah. I mean, I don't care whether you've got a church of 20,000 people or a church with 5 people. There is nothing more pure in my opinion than to watch that cycle take place.
That's
Nothing.
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. So we talked yesterday for a bit, and you had something you were pretty passionate about, talking about kind of the transition of being a pastor to not being a pastor anymore. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I have that. I've been blessed to kind of have this unique experience where I was going to church and then experienced 14 or 15 years of pastoring, and then and seeing all that God can do, but all the things that I was so concerned about,
Hmm.
all the things that I stressed about, all the things that I'm so glad that God just does what he does because all the things that I thought were so important, we spent so much time laboring over, and then to be on the other side, I went through like this very, very, very awkward like year of life where after and hey Pastor Tim, hey Pastor Tim, hey PT, hey PT, like and that becomes your identity. And then all of a sudden you wake up one morning, like I the first Sunday we were here, we went to Life Church, their broadcast campus, and
Hmm.
um, they finished, and I just sat there. I sat there in a seat, and Teresa said, "Come on, let's go. Like I've got dinner's on," and I was like, "But who's taking out the trash? like who's like what?" It was so weird for me. Then you slowly like started to shed some of that, like the church responsibility. Then I went through the very, very unpleasant process of removing that pastor title,
Hmm.
which comes with a lot of accountability. It comes with a lot of covering,
Hmm.
I think, to a degree, even if it's in your own mind.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden I was left with, who are you outside of being a pastor?
Mm.
And that was rough. That was a rough look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Um, like, was I reading, like, was I in the word because I knew I had to preach on Sunday? Or was I in the word because, uh, I wanted to be in the word. I was hungry. I wanted to learn. I wanted to communicate with the Holy Spirit. Like I wanted to experience that discipleship firsthand. And so I went through like almost an identity crisis.
Yeah.
And then I kind of hit this place where I was like, you know what? I just miss prayer,
Mm.
like at an intimate level. And
Mm.
so I kind of had the opportunity to fall back in love with Jesus just personally.
Yeah.
Not that I wasn't before, but it was just
It's different.
different. It was
Yeah.
different. But I think the thing that what it has done for me is now that I'm a part of a local church, and I've been to different ones, but like, and I have a good friend in Iowa who pastors. I talk to him regularly. I all the things that the local church today, and this is by no means, this is not a knock on anything that I mean, pastoring, hardest thing on the planet to do. And will, I'll go to my grave.
Hmm.
Like it is the hardest. Like if you know a pastor, like send them a Chick-fil-A gift card,
Yeah.
something, like tell them you love them, because it's the hardest thing that anybody can do.
Yeah.
There's nothing more emotional than that. So this is not my point, but I learned that all of the things that I was so obsessive about, and all the things that I thought were so important, um, oddly enough, now that I'm not pastoring and I'm just in the local church, none of those things are the things that I'm craving.
Yeah.
Like that's not really, well, that's not why I'm craving. I don't even know if those are the things that even like walk me through the door. But now what I'm craving is totally, I'm craving deeper levels of connection. And I'm craving stillness,
Mm.
which is wild.
Yeah.
I would be completely fine on Sunday
Yeah.
if no one said anything for like 15 minutes. And if I could just sit and like just listen to a wonderful piano and just allow God to just
Hmm.
and I'm not even like from a super like I like I said, this could sound kind of Pentecostally, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but I that's not like my background.
Yeah.
But I just like I crave stillness, I crave more intimate connection. And if I were to plant a church today, I honestly don't know what it would look like. I just know it wouldn't look like anything that I've ever done before.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I've thought about it. I'm afraid to go down that rabbit
Yeah.
hole too deep.
Isn't that
Uh,
beautiful though?
yeah,
Like that's just how cool God is. Like he's growing all of us. Like we'll never arrive.
yeah,
Like you poured your heart and soul into ministry, pastoring, with with a lot of autonomy to do what you wanted to do, and you got to do that. And there's so much greatness about it, right? But then here you are, like God would have you do something totally different
yeah.
because He's growing you and maturing you. Um, yeah, it's fascinating how that works.
I just think that we live in this world where there there is this like dichotomy that I feel like the local church faces, where discipleship by definition is multiplication. So I don't think it's about the number of people.
Hmm.
I've had people come up to me and say, the church is just growing. I just don't know if I don't know if I like it. I really liked our small little church. And I be like, you're going to hate heaven. You're going to hate it. It should be all about, in a way, it is all about the numbers, because if we're all doing our job, let's be honest, if you and I are both living, if we're both modeling our life after Jesus,
Hmm.
and we're living our life in that point, that type of connection with God,
Hmm.
and we are beginning to see the world through a scope that He would have us see it in every day, it would natural, like it's ingrained inside of every believer in our Jesus DNA, would be that we would duplicate.
Yeah.
So it has to be about numbers to a degree,
Hmm.
but I think that the challenge is how do you duplicate while also remaining with it not being about what's necessarily going on inside of a structure or even a strategy, but more about, I just believe our communities across America are just hurting.
Hmm.
I just think people are hurting.
Hmm.
I mean, I see it all the time.
Yeah.
I see it when Carter's playing AAU.
Yeah.
When I'm in the gym, it's very, very easy to look around and like you can see kids that are hurting. Um, and I think like the world really, really, really needs um, it really, really needs the church to somehow awaken to its real identity and be okay with that.
Yeah.
Just like be okay with just that.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, I don't know what it would look like.
Yeah.
So I am certainly not here saying like, oh, I've got the answer and there's a book coming out next month.
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
Hmm.
I just know that there is a greater depth to what Jesus intended for the church to be than what 90%
Hmm.
or more are experiencing right now.
Yeah. I think it's humility.
Mm,
And I
Very well,
think
maybe.
that specifically in the I've arrived standpoint, or our church has arrived, or our denomination has arrived. If we can have some humility in knowing that we're not going to arrive,
Yeah.
like God is going to continue to morph and mature and grow us into something else to meet the way that the world is morphing and evolving, not to not that we would compromise, but that we would just speak their language. And there's a level of authenticity that comes with that because we're experiencing the world the way they are. It's just we have a different filter. And whenever we have a different filter and we can actually truly, what you were kind of getting to earlier, of live the life like Jesus would have lived it, then that's going to be magnetic
Yeah.
because it's ingrained in us.
Yeah.
And every atheist, they have the ID, the DNA of our same God in them, and there's that thing in them that will be drawn to kindness, gentleness, humility,
Yeah.
um, wisdom, and there's a big thing right now talking about like the world is starving for fathers and mothers,
Yeah.
starving.
Starving.
And what we at True North hope to do is develop fathers, spiritual fathers, men that can go and shepherd and do exactly what you did for Kobe in that year, of not even just for their own kids, but for young men all over the place. Like they're saying, Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan and all these, like, the reason that they're just exploding and everybody's going to them is because in a way they're fathering. Now, not
Yes.
necessarily exactly how we would father, right?
Sure.
But like
Yeah.
there's a lot of good in it, and
Yeah.
there's some bad, but like the world is starving for mothers and fathers. And so if we as a church can be humble enough to step into that role and not, instead of like the world doesn't need authoritarians or principles or like just dictators. Obviously, they need mothers and fathers,
Yeah.
and there's a level of humility and relationship that comes with that.
I mean, I'm just the other day, I was all of my kids were here for Memorial Day weekend,
Mm-hmm.
so they're all in the room. And I've been struggling. I don't mind sharing this. So I was raised in a household of like alcohol was absolutely forbidden, Um, and so as I've gotten older, um, I've taken what I believe to be uh, I don't know how to say this. For me in my own in my life, I've gotten to a place where like I'm okay with having a glass of champagne or whatever the case may be. Well, so my kids, I've got two kids that are over 21, so like they they come over to the house and one of them was having a seltzer or something,
Mm-hmm.
and so which I actually I don't have a problem with.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this thought and I kind of spoke it out loud because they were saying something about, this isn't about alcohol. And I made this statement. I am not nearly as concerned. You may end up cutting this out and say this is bad advice. But I said, I'm not nearly as concerned about some of these hot topics about whether or not you should have a drink of alcohol or have a cigar or whatever the case may be, like, or get a tattoo. Like, my greatest desire, like I just told all my kids, my greatest desire is that you would never, ever, ever abandon or forget like how amazing it is to have a relationship with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Because if, from my point of view, if they have that, the rest of the stuff's going to take care of
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
Then they'll work out their own salvation with fear and trembling. And so from that standpoint, I don't know, like I'm just like so convicted about, I mean, I haven't been pastoring for a year, let's say a year and a half. So what's that? 500 days, 450 days or something. And I've been asking myself the question out of, let's just say it's 450 days, 450 days. How many of those days have I been moving slow enough to hear the Holy Spirit say, go up and pray for that person?
Mm.
And so like, for me, I'm like, but that's what I should be like. That is the church.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the church. Like we are we believe that we have the power of the Holy Spirit within us as believers, we have this amazing connection to be able to be a vessel, to be able to know like who that is and who God has for us to intersect in their life in a moment to speak truth, encouragement, life. Like There's so many things like that I've been unpacking,
Yeah.
and I'm almost like I don't want to make a commitment like 75 hard or something
Yeah.
crazy like that, or what they did B90X for a while through
Yeah.
the Bible 90 days. Like I was like 365 days you have to pray for one person like randomly every day. I don't want to make a commitment and then
Yeah.
not something I can't follow through. But I am at this point where I'm like, I'm becoming more and more awakened to the reality that this thing that we call being a believer is way more beautiful
Hmm.
outside of the building.
Yep. Yep.
And that has both challenged me and also stirred me in a way that I haven't been in a long time.
That's so good.
No.
That's so good.
So
So a lot of that has led you to Oklahoma. And thank you for sharing kind of your story leading up to this point. It's really beautiful to hear kind of your walk with God and your obedience. And I know in prior conversations you and I have had, you've been through some really hard things in ministry uh, that you just had to stay obedient. And
yeah.
God's been really cool in your life. So thanks for sharing that. I'd love to talk now about Wine to Water and what you've got going on with them, because it's a really special organization. We've gotten to talk a lot about that. The first time I ever heard about it, though, I said, "Oh, that's a good strategy. Do exactly opposite of what Jesus did.
Yeah.
Going wine to water."
Yeah.
Tell us what's Wine to Water. What's that all about?
So around 2.5 years ago, obviously I had actually started my own injection mold company. My father had retired, and
Mhm.
so I was doing that while I was pastoring. Teresa and I had felt we really both were carrying a heavy burden for Haley, and knew she was going through some things. We'd been talking about, is there a way that we could be there? Like how would that even work?
Yeah.
So I had been working on Wine to Water is a nonprofit organization. They're not a religious nonprofit organization, so by definition, they're just a nonprofit. It was founded. Just going to give you that. It was founded by a man named Doc Henley 20 years ago. And I'll kind of come back to that. But at the time, they focus on clean water access, providing it to people around the world who don't have it, and they've started using a lot of what I would call microfiltration. It's called technically hollow fiber filtration, but these mobile filtration units that a lot of people use for hiking, survival, things like that. But they had approached me about wanting to design their own, because they were really doing. They were doing corporate events where people were assembling these filters, and then they're introducing them in their international programming. And it's great for disaster relief. Find a community, no, dirty water, sickness, death. We can't get a well drilled right now, but we can provide with you 5-gallon buckets that you can dump dirty water in. That's going to filter that to clean drinking water, and we can make the community healthy.
Mhm.
And it's great for sustainability and for that instance.
Mhm.
And so I've been working on that. And then while I'm having conversations with Teresa about potentially what would it look like for us to relocate to Oklahoma, during that time I met Doc, the founder, at a coffee shop in Boone, North Carolina, which is where our headquarters are at.
Okay.
And we were supposed to sign documents, basically on new molds, and my shop was going to run the filters. And Doc and I had talked a couple times and really connected on a couple of really cool levels. And he said, "Hey, I know that you're pastoring right now, but I have two passions for Wine to Water: having our own filter, and I really want to start partnering with local churches. I feel very strongly that that is something that Wine to Water is supposed to be doing. I know we're not a religious nonprofit. We do a lot of work with corporations, but that doesn't mean that we can't partner with the local church,"
Mhm.
which is pretty new. That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And so he said, "I would like for Wine to Water to purchase your injection mold company, and would you consider coming to work? Like, will you join me in this mission? And you can work remote." And I was like, "Well, man, like, this is pretty crazy because that kind of answers the question whether or not we can move to Oklahoma. Um, and so I went home, I prayed about it, and Teresa said, Tim, what other possibility could you find it where an organization is looking for someone with injection molding experience
No
and
kidding.
pastor experience? She's like, she said, I'm not an expert, but I have to assume that's a pretty small group. It's a pretty nichey job.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, kind of seems that way. And so I think it was pretty clear, so I went ahead, we executed that. And so over the last year and a half, I've had the opportunity to pilot a church partnership program. My same friend that I was talking about in Iowa that pastors a church. Shout out to Wes Kennedy at Grace Baptist Church in Waterloo, Iowa. He was bold enough to step out and be the first church to pilot a church partnership with Wine to Water.
Cool.
And we did that. And then he introduced me to another church in the community. So we piloted 2 churches about an hour from each other in Iowa. And that was an amazing experience. Both those churches signed up for like a 3-year commitment and partnership. And then once that pilot program was over, we paused and shifted our focus to launching our filter. Mm-hmm. And so we've officially launched what we have called the drop filter. And that drop filter is now being used in our international programming. Some of the components are being sourced overseas, but the majority of them are being made in the U.S., right in East Tennessee, which is amazing. And we're actually getting ready to launch that filter on retail markets on July 15th.
Awesome.
So very much kind of like a Tom's model where we're releasing the filter and some accessories, but the goal is to basically we're launching a missional brand that can connect people to the mission of clean water access while also providing them some touch point with clean water in their everyday life. So super blessed to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And now we're back to getting a green light on starting that church partnership program in full operation. So, yeah.
What are you most excited about with Wine to Water?
So I just came back from I was gone for 7 days. I had a chance to spend a week with we have global teams in South Africa, Tanzania, Nepal, Dominican Republic, and Colombia.
Okay.
And so I had a chance to fly into Bogota with our president and our director of HR. We teamed up with the global team there in Colombia. We did some events in Colombia, like Central Colombia. And then I had a chance to fly down to the Amazon to a small city called Leticia, and had a chance from that being our headquarters to take some hour and 2-hour long boat rides up and down the Amazon.
Wow.
And it's one thing to work in a nonprofit and to see pictures, to hear narratives. I've been in a ton of meetings and I've heard stories. It's completely different when you go 2 hours up the Amazon and you just pull up to a rickety dock and you step into a community of 90 people. And there's no roads connecting, to this village.
Yeah.
It is just a village of 90 people. That most of them do have power, either from solar or from line, because the government provides them with power because they're indigenous communities, but they have no clean water access. So we're talking very if any toilets, running water sinks.
Yeah.
Their water source is the Amazon.
Yeah. And you said if you drill a well there, the water's pretty much bad from the well. Even.
The majority of the water that we've got from wells that we have drilled, there's just so much flooding during the rainy season. There's so much contaminants, even with casing. It's just so hard to get a clean water source. So you still have to provide, and that's at like the municipal level. Like if you're going to drill a well, create a more of a commercial filtration system, and we're doing that right now in some of those communities where we're actually laying down plumbing, piping water. But for some of these communities, we went to one community with 6 houses, and we were probably 5,000 yards, off the Amazon. If it wasn't the rainy season, we would have had to walk a half a mile, or more just to kind of get back to where we're at. And it's 6 houses completely cut off. I mean, there's little kids running around, and they know what they know. But I mean, to hear testimonies from some of these community leaders about how since they've had access to filtration, or we put a couple toilets in with rainwater harvesting system and these bio septic systems, and to hear testimonies about how their community health has improved by 70% or 80%. And I mean, we're talking about people who live with diarrhea every single day.
Oh my gosh.
Because it would be impossible to not have like bacteria infection continually, or parasite, or whatever the case may be, and so we're dehydration and extreme sickness. Most women in a lot of these communities are reduced to nothing more than water fetchers, especially in Africa. And so right now, like obviously I'm super jazzed about launching this filter. Because I think it's just so amazing that people are going to be able to have touch point to something so powerful as providing. There's nothing more spiritual than water, So that's the beautiful thing about water is it is like the divine dignity that God created every human being to experience, need, and have. And so I view like sin's the only reason why people don't have clean water right now. And so I just feel it's like it's a way of conquering sin, like one filter at a time, in some spiritual warfare kind of a way. But I mean, it's the beauty of clean water, I mean, to see kids dumping water into their bucket and like, we made this lemonade for you from filtered water. I'm like so proud of that. Dispensing soap to one community, which was incredible. And so, but I mean, right now, the thing that I'm most, and also to work with people from on our global teams, these are, and the reality is the majority of them, of our Columbia team, like they're believers. There's something inside of every believer that has a desire to serve. Even for the least of these, there's that's just, it's in there. And so having a chance to, talk about Jesus along the Amazon while delivering water. It was a pretty amazing, life-changing experience, obviously. But for me right now, I'm most excited, about being able to partner with the local church. Because I believe that the local church is like this incredible power that's just waiting to be like unleashed. There's nothing that can move faster and more powerfully than the local church. So super excited to be able to partner with local churches and be a part of that. So
what could some of our listeners do if this is stirring something up in them to be a part of this or to help out? What are some of the things that they could do to help you out?
So I think the great thing is that with local churches is that we can provide a couple of different options. So we have the ability to select region, and it could be, hey, we're gonna right now, every local church in the U.S. right now we're working towards installing 1,000 toilets along the Amazon, which is a huge undertaking, but so powerful in so many ways. When we're talking about sustainability, life, man. And so we can do that. The other great thing is, and this is what in our pilot churches did, is we provide these events called filter build events. So these filters that I'm talking about, they're manufactured. The majority of the pieces are manufactured in the U.S. There's 15 total components, So what we do is churches, whether they run it through their church, their mission program, their VBS, their sports camp, but they can fund individual filters. They set a goal. We come in, do a kickoff Sunday. We call it like Pass the Cup. We do a Pass the Cup Sunday, present wine to water. They set a goal. They raise the money for the filters. Once they've reached their sponsorship goal, then what we do is we come back with all of the components and we do a filter build event. And so everybody who's funded filters, they get an opportunity to actually assemble these filters in real time, personalize a card for the end recipient, which, we do a really good job at making sure that our recipients understand that this is the person that funded this filter. And so we get a chance, usually we'll team that up in the churches that both churches was revolved around like a night of worship, filter build, just really great, great time of worship. And then that provides this really amazing missional touch point of serving the least of these, providing something like water that's life-giving, but without, some people aren't able to go, on a missions trip, or may not have the funding or the finances to do that. But this is an amazing way where you're literally building something. One filter provides a family of up to 10 people clean water access for up to 10 years.
Wow.
So it's it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was pretty amazing. Our first two pilot churches funded 540 filters, I think, which was just amazing. Like our wine to water team was blown away by that.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, cool. Is there anything else you'd like them to know about that, or?
No, I mean, I'll be happy to give you my email and you can always post it in the info, but people can, if they're interested in maybe doing a partnership, they can just reach out to me. We would love to have that conversation and kind of be a part of helping lay some of those initial levels down of church partnerships. But yeah, I appreciate it very much for you allowing me to share some of that.
Absolutely. Do you have a website?
WTW.org.
Okay. That's pretty easy.
Yeah, super easy. Yeah.
Well, cool. Yep. Well, that's incredible work that you're doing. It's been fun to hear about your journeys. You went over to Asia last year, right? And
I did. I had a chance to go to China. To meet with some people over there. That was pretty amazing too.
Yeah. So that's really cool, man. And excited for all your journeys going forward, and really thankful to have you on the podcast today. It was really cool to kind of hear what God's done in your life and what He continues to do. So thanks for being on.
I appreciate it.